Mark Townsend thought murder would solve his problems. Emily Townsend thought family still meant something. Only one of them was right. Until the day her body was found buried beneath the pines, and the perfect family image shattered forever. The Townsends lived in a charming white house with blue shutters at the end of Willow Creek Lane, a quiet road in rural Vermont, where the biggest news was usually about bake sales or a stray cat returning home. David Townsend was the high school principal, known for his strict but fair leadership and his annual speeches about integrity and hard work. His wife, Linda, was equally admired. She organized charity events, led Sunday school, and always had a fresh pie ready for anyone who stopped by. Their two grown children, Mark and Emily, had both moved back home recently, Mark after a failed business venture in Boston, and Emily after finishing a degree in environmental science. To anyone looking, from the outside, the Townsends were the kind of family others looked up to. They smiled in church pews, waved to neighbors from their porch, and seemed to have everything in order. But behind closed doors, small cracks had begun to spread. They weren't shouting or slamming doors yet, but there was tension. It started with the unexpected death of David's older brother, Charles, who owned a large piece of untouched land just outside town. In his will, Charles left the land to David, but David made it clear he wanted to share the property evenly with Mark and Emily. That's when things began to shift. Mark saw dollar signs. He believed the land, if sold, could wipe out his debts and give him a fresh start. He even researched developers and investors willing to buy it. But Emily, who had a deep love for nature, was strongly against it. She had plans to turn the land into a community garden or maybe even a nature preserve. She believed the land should be protected, not bulldozed for condos or shopping centers. David tried to stay above the fray, often brushing off arguments with vague comments about doing what's best. Linda, however, took Emily's side. She said Charles would have wanted the land kept intact, and that turning it into a sanctuary would be a tribute to his quiet, solitary life. Mark felt ganged up on. He started spending more time alone in his room or out driving, barely speaking to anyone at dinner. The situation only worsened when Mark discovered that Emily had already contacted a local conservation group about her plan. Feeling cornered, he accused her of going behind everyone's back. The calm, polite conversations began to turn bitter. Family meals were shorter, colder. Smiles felt forced. And while no one screamed or slammed doors, the silence between them grew heavier each day. Neighbors noticed a change, too. The Townsends stopped hosting their usual Sunday brunches. The porch light, always on until midnight, now went dark earlier. David walked with his head down. Linda stopped attending some of her usual gatherings. But no one dared ask questions. In small towns, people sometimes prefer to pretend nothing is wrong, hoping things will fix themselves. No one imagined just how wrong things were about to go. Emily Townsend vanished on a cold Thursday morning in early November. She was supposed to meet her childhood friend, Claire Simmons, for lunch at a local cafe just a few miles from town. Emily never missed appointments. She was punctual, organized, and always texted if she was running late. But that day, Claire waited alone at the cafe for nearly an hour before realizing something was wrong. Repeated calls went straight to voicemail. No one had heard from Emily since the previous evening. That night, the family called the police to report her missing. The responding officer took it seriously. Emily wasn't the type to disappear on a whim. Within hours, a search was launched. Her car was found the next morning parked neatly at the edge of a wooded hiking trail on the outskirts of town. The doors were unlocked. Her phone and wallet sat untouched in the passenger seat, and the keys were still in the ignition. There were no signs of a struggle. No footprints led away from the car. The scene felt too quiet, too clean. Volunteers from the community came out in droves, forming search lines and combing through the forest. Police dogs were brought in, and helicopters scanned from above. Days passed with no progress. The forest, with its twisting trails and dense underbrush, offered too many places to hide, too many ways to vanish. David and Linda appeared on local news stations pleading for information. Their faces were pale, voices shaking. They asked for prayers, for tips, for anything. Mark stood beside them during these appearances, his face unreadable, arms folded tightly. He said all the right things, but some viewers commented online that he looked distant, detached. Others said grief comes in all forms. Detectives began retracing Emily's last known steps. She had spent the previous day at home helping Linda in the garden and making notes in a notebook filled with ideas for the land. Her laptop revealed emails exchanged with the conservation group she'd contacted. Her final text message was sent at 9:12 p.m. the night before she disappeared, confirming lunch plans with Claire. Suspicion started to form around the edges. People in town whispered that maybe she'd run away, that perhaps she'd wanted to start over somewhere new. But her purse was still in the car, her passport untouched in her bedroom drawer, and her bank account showed no recent withdrawals. She hadn't packed a bag. There was no trace of planning. Investigators kept circling back to one unsettling truth. Nothing about Emily's disappearance made sense. And yet, something about it felt intentional, as if someone had gone to great lengths to erase her without leaving a trace. Then, on the 8th day of the search, the mood in town changed. The search dogs caught a scent in a remote area of the woods, far from the main trails. Officers marked the ground, pulled back branches, and began to dig. Within minutes, their worst fears were confirmed. Emily Townsend had not disappeared. She had been buried, and someone very close to her knew exactly where to find the silence. The discovery of Emily Townsend's body sent shockwaves through the town. No one had been prepared for the grim confirmation of her death. For a week, people had clung to hope, believing she might be lost, confused, or even hiding. Now all of that vanished in an instant. Her body had been carefully buried in a shallow grave beneath layers of pine needles and loose soil, about a mile off the trail where her car had been found. The path leading to the site wasn't obvious. Thick brush, fallen branches, and steep terrain made it nearly impossible to find unless someone knew exactly where to look. An autopsy was performed within hours. The coroner confirmed that Emily had died from blunt force trauma to the back of the head. There were no defensive wounds, no signs of a struggle, and no evidence that she had fought back. This suggested that she had likely been attacked from behind, possibly by someone she trusted, someone she didn't see coming. The precision and lack of chaos around the crime scene raised a red flag. Whoever did this had taken their time. It wasn't a random act of violence. It was controlled, planned. The investigation shifted dramatically. Detectives who had been casting a wide net now narrowed their focus. They revisited the family, particularly Mark. Tensions between the Fee siblings were no secret. Friends had come forward to share that the arguments over the land had grown more heated in recent weeks. Mark had reportedly told one friend that he was sick of Emily trying to take everything, and that she'd regret pushing him too far. Police obtained a warrant for Mark's phone and computer. Though he had tried to delete a number of messages, investigators were able to recover a few fragments. One in particular stood out. A message sent to Emily just days before her death. It read, "Let's meet and figure this out, once and for all." It was short, vague, and left plenty of room for interpretation. But given the context, and her subsequent disappearance, it carried weight. Detectives also began reviewing surveillance footage from nearby roads and businesses. That's when they found something troubling. A traffic camera had captured a car matching Mark's vehicle heading toward the trailhead early on the morning Emily went missing. Later that same day, it was seen returning along the same road, covered in a fine layer of dirt along the bumper. The timestamp matched almost exactly with the estimated time of Emily's death. When police searched Mark's car, more evidence surfaced. In the trunk, they found a shovel, a pair of work gloves, and muddy boots with traces of soil consistent with the area where Emily had been buried. Lab tests also detected a small amount of blood on the edge of the shovel blade, blood that matched Emily's DNA. The case that had once seemed like a mystery was beginning to unravel. Piece by piece, the truth was becoming clearer. Mark Townsend was no longer just a grieving brother. He was now the prime suspect in a murder investigation. And the walls were closing in fast. Mark Townsend maintained his innocence even as the evidence mounted against him. When detectives confronted him with the recovered text messages, the surveillance footage, and the physical items found in his trunk, he calmly claimed it was all a misunderstanding. He said the shovel and boots were from a recent hiking trip. The text message to Emily, he insisted, was about making peace, not anything sinister. He said he had been home the entire morning that Emily disappeared, watching TV alone. But he couldn't prove it. No neighbors saw him. No digital devices backed up his timeline. Behind the scenes, the investigation continued to peel back layers of Mark's recent life. Financial records showed he was drowning in debt. The business venture in Boston that had brought him back home had left him with thousands in unpaid loans. Credit cards were maxed out. His car payments were months behind. But the land, valued at over $1.2 million if sold to developers, represented a way out. If Emily blocked the sale, Mark would lose everything. Police began interviewing those closest to the family. Linda, shaken by the discovery of her daughter's body, struggled to speak. David, usually composed, was visibly broken. Both claimed they had no idea Mark was capable of such a thing, but deep down, they had sensed his growing resentment. He had become more withdrawn, more irritable. He avoided family dinners, often disappearing without explanation. Still, nothing prepared them for the possibility that their son might have killed his own sister. Detectives learned that just 2 days before Emily vanished, Mark had contacted a local real estate agent asking how quickly the land could be sold. He was told that as long as all parties agreed, the process could begin immediately. Emily, of course, never agreed. As police worked to tighten their case, Mark's behavior grew increasingly strange. He stopped cooperating with investigators. He refused to answer further questions and hired a lawyer. Then, just days before police were set to issue a formal warrant for his arrest, Mark disappeared. His phone was turned off. His car was found abandoned in a grocery store parking lot 2 towns over. A security camera nearby showed him walking away from the car wearing a baseball cap and a large backpack. He hadn't taken much, just a few clothes, some cash, and what appeared to be a fake ID. The search for Emily had become the search for Mark. Authorities issued a bulletin across state lines, warning that he may be dangerous and on the run. Tips trickled in. sightings in rest stops, gas stations and small towns, but none confirmed. People in town were stunned. First Emily's murder, now Mark's flight. The family, once seen as the epitome of goodness, had become the center of a real-life nightmare. Parents whispered at school pickups, neighbors locked their doors at night. No one knew where Mark had gone, and more importantly, no one knew what he might do next. What began as a family disagreement had spiraled into something unthinkable. The only question now was whether Mark Townsend could truly vanish, or if the truth would catch up to him before he could disappear forever. Mark Townsend's escape didn't last long. For nearly 2 weeks he managed to evade capture, slipping through small towns and back roads along the northeastern corridor. He used cash only, avoided cameras, and kept moving at night. Authorities believed he was trying to cross into Canada. His sudden disappearance, following the overwhelming evidence linking him to his sister's murder, left no doubt in the minds of investigators. Mark was guilty, and now he was desperate. The town of Crestwood, once quiet and trusting, remained on edge. News stations replayed Mark's image daily. Law enforcement launched a full manhunt, circulating his photo to every local department within a 500-mile radius. His face was posted at bus stations, airports, and border checkpoints. Still, he stayed one step ahead. Then, a break came from the unlikeliest place, a small fishing dock in a remote coastal town in Maine. A worker there had recently hired a quiet man going by the name Alan Burke. He was thin, kept his head down, and barely spoke. The only thing that stood out was the way he flinched every time a police car passed. After seeing a local news segment, the dock worker recognized the man as Mark Townsend and called it in. Authorities moved fast. Within hours, a team surrounded the dock at dawn. Mark was arrested without incident. He didn't speak, didn't struggle, and offered no resistance. When officers searched his belongings, they found a fake ID, a small stash of cash, and a notebook containing scribbled plans for disappearing permanently. He had been mapping bus routes, border towns, and abandoned cabins. Back in Vermont, the arrest brought a strange mix of relief and sorrow. Emily's death had devastated the community. Now, her killer, her own brother, would face justice. The courtroom was packed when the trial began. David and Linda sat in the front row, stone-faced and silent. Mark, once the boy neighbors remembered riding bikes through town, now looked like a stranger, thin, hollow-eyed, and distant. The prosecution presented a meticulous timeline, the growing tension over the land, the message luring Emily to meet him, the surveillance footage, the murder weapon, and the DNA evidence. They called in experts who explained how the scene had been staged, how the burial was rushed but deliberate. Every piece pointed to premeditation. The defense had little to work with. They attempted to argue that the evidence was circumstantial, that Mark had panicked after discovering Emily already hurt. But the jury didn't buy it. They deliberated for just over 2 hours before delivering the verdict: guilty of first-degree murder. Mark Townsend was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. The case closed, but the scars remained. David and Linda never spoke publicly again. The once perfect image of the Townsend family had been shattered. The house on Willow Creek Lane was sold and left empty for months before new owners moved in. In the end, the story of the Townsend family became a cautionary tale. A feud over land led to betrayal, murder, and a failed escape. Mark thought he could bury the truth along with his sister, But the truth has a way of surfacing, even from the quietest, most hidden places.